Hello and welcome to another review of a film that I've watched on Mubi. This time I'm reviewing The Souvenir Parts 1 and Parts 2 by Joanna Hogg. Now I'm a big fan of Joanna Hogg's films. I've seen Exhibition, Archipelago and Unrelated, and all of the films have similar themes. They're often about kind of family dysfunction and dysfunctional relationships, and the amazing thing about her films is how naturalistic they are. I don't quite know the process by which she works with actors, but the conversation is kind of painfully natural at times and really compelling work. The one thing you might say about her work, those three films, is I watched them quite close together. And if you watch them around the same time, you might question whether they're a little bit too much the same. I think they're probably quite autobiographical, which is interesting in terms of the themes of The Souvenir and authenticity in artwork. But overall, I really enjoy her work. Now, The Souvenir did feel a little bit different because it did feel like it went a little bit deeper. It's still about dysfunctional relationships. Part 1 is about a kind of relationship with an addict, and part 2 is about the kind of ongoing consequences of that relationship. But throughout the two films, there's an underlying theme about filmmaking, and in some ways I found this the most interesting element of the film. I really enjoyed watching, what this film is saying about filmmaking, or what I think it's saying. Let's just deal with the issue of the fact that it's in two parts. I'm a little bit dubious about whether this film needed to be in two parts. I mean, the two obvious films that come to mind that I really enjoyed that were in two parts was Nymphomaniac and Kill Bill. And, you can contrast those with films like Bela Tarr's Satan Tango, which is 7 hours in one sitting, or Hamaguchi's Happy Hour, which is 5 hours, I think. And so there's an interesting issue as to when do you show a film in two parts, or when do you show it as a really long film. In the case of Nymphomaniac and Kill Bill, I'm not sure that there is an artistic reason to split them. I think the directors have decided that the film should be in two parts because it's too long. And there's something that I kind of feel slightly uneasy about this. It feels like a coherent piece of work should be standalone, that I shouldn't have to go to the cinema twice unless there's an artistic or a poetic reason for that to happen. I think that in the case of The Souvenir, I'm not sure it needs to be in two parts. I think it could have been a one-part film. That said, because I really enjoyed it, I was happy to be in that world, so I actually enjoyed the two parts. But the other issue is when there's a two-part film, which I think is worth just mentioning here, is whether each part should be standalone, such that you can watch the second part without having seen the first part. I think it's possible that should be the case. I think if each film kind of stands alone on its artistic merit, I think that gives it an extra validity. But I think you would probably struggle watching The Souvenir Part 2 without having seen Part 1. So the most interesting thing, I think, about this film is what it's saying about filmmaking. And it's really, I think, a lot of in the two parts, we see the main character at film school making films. And the question that's being interrogated really is how you make an authentic work and how much you have to rely on your own experience in terms of being authentic to make good artwork. Because in part 1, she's making a film about a mother and son in the industrial north, where I don't think she has any experience of that, and the tutors kind of question this. In the second film, she's making the film about the consequences of the relationship, the difficult relationship that she was in. So she's directly making a film about her own experience. And I think that what's really interesting about it is that in part two, she's really questioning the pitfalls of making a film about your own experience. Yes, it may be more authentic, but if it becomes kind of too much doing your therapy through the film that you're making, there's a risk of it becoming self-indulgent. And I love when her friend says, did you avoid the temptation to be obvious? Because that is kind of the key question. Because if you're too obvious, I think that's the risk of self-indulgent when you're using artwork as a way of processing, of doing therapy, of healing. I like the fact there's a surprise in part two that we see her filming one film which very much is the obvious one. She has characters clearly playing her and her partner, and we see the scenes acted out as we kind of know them from the first film. But then when we actually see, when it comes to her graduation show and we actually see the final film, it's completely different than the film we see her making. It's kind of it is about the relationship, but it's a more kind of surreal art house version of it. And I really like this. We don't know which is the real one that she made. And so there's this nice ambiguity. I do wonder, in terms of what she's saying about filmmaking, I kind of have a sense of that there's some cynicism about filmmaking. I have the feeling that she's actually questioning whether being a filmmaker is worth it. If, you kind of have to do therapy in order to be authentic. And she's certainly not very complimentary about the role of film school and tutors. And so there's a kind of cynicism about that. But all of that is really interesting and engaging. In conclusion, I'd say this film is definitely worth watching, both of them. As I say, I'm not 100% convinced it needed to be in two films, but her work is so interesting and compelling that I'm never bored by her work. I'll always be happy to watch any film that she makes. It might be interesting to see her do something different in future, but I'll certainly be watching what she produces next. Next time I'll be reviewing the film Pleasure, directed by Ninja Thyberg. See you next time.